If you had stood on the edge of a rural field during World War II, especially in parts of North America and Europe facing rationing, you would have seen something that looks almost primitive by today's standards. Low earthen mounds, no straight rows, no sprinklers, no tractors. Yet those humble mounds produced astonishing amounts of food at a time when, honestly, failure meant hunger. The squash mound was not a novelty, not folklore, and not a hobby garden trick. It was a deliberate survival system, refined under pressure, and capable of producing several times more calories per square foot while using a fraction of the water modern agriculture demands. What makes this story important is not nostalgia. It is the fact that this system worked when everything else broke down. And then, almost immediately after the war, it vanished from serious agricultural conversation. Why wartime farmers turned to squash mounds when resources disappeared. During the war years, fuel was rationed, fertilizer production was redirected to explosives, and irrigation infrastructure was either non-existent or unreliable. Farmers and civilian gardeners had to rely on techniques that functioned without inputs. Squash mounds answered that need perfectly. Built by hand with local soil, compost and organic waste, these raised mounds created their own microclimate. The elevated structure warmed earlier in spring, drained excess rain, and retained moisture deep within the mound long after surface soil dried out. Squash plants, especially winter varieties, were chosen because of their aggressive growth habit. Their broad leaves shaded the soil, reducing evaporation dramatically. The vines sprawled outward, protecting the mound from wind and sun, while the root system penetrated deep into the enriched core. Once established, these plants required minimal watering and produced heavily through the season. So, how did the humble squash mound manage to achieve such extreme yields with, honestly, so little water? Well, the secret wasn't just the squash itself. It was, in fact, the architecture of the mound. Farmers would layer organic matter right into the centre. Things like kitchen scraps, manure, straw, and even bits of partially rotted vegetation. As all this material broke down, it released a slow and steady supply of nutrients, while at the same time acting a bit like a sponge under the ground. Water that would usually just run off or disappear into the air was instead captured and stored safely below the root zone. What this meant was, if irrigation was used at all, it could be infrequent and really quite targeted. During dry spells and drought conditions, the mound just kept feeding the plant from within. Field reports, as well as post-war agricultural studies, showed yields that were as much as 5 times higher per planted area compared to the old flat-row squash with conventional watering. But perhaps even more importantly, the calorie output per gallon of water was dramatically higher, absolutely vital during times of wartime scarcity. Now, here's how this method fit into the broader wartime food strategy. Squash mounds were often integrated into victory gardens and rural subsistence plots, mainly because they paired so well with other crops. Farmers would sometimes plant corn or sunflowers at the centre, or on the windward side of the mound, offering both structural support and a bit of shade. Beans or peas might be added too, fixing nitrogen and enriching the soil without needing chemical fertilizers. None of this was accidental, mind you. It was a system purposefully designed to stack functions and eliminate waste. Winter squash varieties were especially valuable because they stored for months without refrigeration. A single successful mound could supply a family with food well into winter, providing carbohydrates, vitamins and fats from the seeds. In occupied or resource-poor regions, this reliability mattered more than uniform appearance or mechanized efficiency. Why industrial agriculture had no place for squash mounds after the war. After WWII, agriculture shifted rapidly toward mechanization and standardization. Flat fields allowed tractors, sprayers and harvesters to operate efficiently. Raised mounds, irregular spacing and mixed plantings did not fit this model. Yield per acre measured in marketable units replaced yield per unit of water, labour independence or nutritional resilience. Squash mounds required observation, hands-on management and local knowledge. They could not be easily scaled into monoculture systems or patented inputs. As chemical fertilizers and irrigation became cheap and abundant, really the incentives to preserve low-input systems disappeared. The method was not disproven, it was simply inconvenient for an industrial framework. So, how can modern growers still apply this wartime method today? Well, recreating a squash mound today really requires no special tools at all. A gardener can simply begin by selecting a sunny site and building a mound that's roughly 3 feet across and about 1 to 2 feet high. Organic material is then layered into the centre and it's covered with soil. Squash seeds are planted around the perimeter, which allows the vines to trail outward. Watering is concentrated during establishment, and then it's gradually reduced as the mound stabilizes. For those who are concerned about drought, water costs or even grid reliability, this method offers proven resilience. It also scales down really well, making it suitable for backyard gardens, homesteads or community plots. The same principles apply, whether you're growing just one mound or many. What this forgotten system tells us about resilience and knowledge loss is, well, quite profound. The disappearance of the squash mound is not a mystery when viewed through the lens of economics. But it is, a warning. Systems optimized for abundance fail differently than systems built for scarcity. Wartime farmers did not choose this method because it was old. They chose it because it worked when nothing else did. Understanding why it was erased helps explain just how much practical knowledge can vanish in a single generation when it no longer fits the dominant model. Why remembering this matters now more than ever. As water becomes more expensive and reliable infrastructure less certain, the lessons of World War II agriculture regain relevance. The squash mound is not a relic. It is a reminder that efficiency can be measured in survival, not just output. If you found this history valuable and want more deep dives into forgotten wartime systems that kept ordinary people alive, make sure to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who still believes that knowing how food is grown matters.